Hamas is a terrorist organization. Hamas is a child of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are tied to the Egyptian wing of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are on terrorist lists at our State Department as well as many other countries. They've taken this area of Gaza, which actually was a beautiful area. It's right on the Mediterranean Sea with a beautiful beach and so forth, and have completely impoverished it, completely destroyed it, because that's what terrorists do. When the Israelis left there, and they left there, in many cases, wonderful buildings behind, water systems behind, electrical systems behind, greenhouses behind, Hamas destroyed them. Hamas was elected in an election that took place as the UN and the Israelis insisted, and that's the first and last election they have. And the people elected the terrorists. Now they have to live under the iron fist of an organization that kills their own people, an organization that, when it attacks Israel, puts its headquarters under elementary schools, stores its missiles under its hospitals, because as far as Hamas and these other death cults are concerned, it really doesn't matter if people die, innocent civilians, babies, and so forth and so on. They have an ideological, fundamentalist cause that is greater than any human being and greater than humanity itself. And that's what Israel's facing. Now, you heard reporting day in and day out over the last 3 or 4 days, which is attacking Israel. I was in Israel. I left for Israel on noon Saturday. I returned 11 a.m. I got home yesterday from Israel. I started looking at the news reports. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. First of all, the whole country is not under attack. The Palestinians on the Jordanian side haven't done anything. The other Arabs that live within Israel, they're not rising up. In fact, 100,000 Israelis marched over the weekend in support of their 71st anniversary of the official state of Israel and the United States moving its embassy to Jerusalem. You didn't see any of that. You didn't see any of that marching going on. Instead, there were headline after headline on websites and in the media about what was taking place as a result of Donald Trump and his decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem, which I'll get to in a minute. So I went to the airwaves last night, the first to tie our media and the Democrat Party to our enemies across the board. When it comes to North Korea, they attack our president. They say our president's going to start a nuclear war. Not this inbred nut job, this insane dictator in North Korea who murders his people, who tortures his people, who steals from his people. The nation is a gulag. It's a police state. No, Donald Trump's going to cause war, don't you know? President of the United States, Donald Trump, ends an outrageous deal that ensures that we will help Iran effectively to have nuclear warheads on ICBMs in 7 years. President said, no, we can't do it. And so he withdraws from it. They said the sky would fall. The sky hasn't fallen. But they blamed him when the Iranians attacked Israel, and Israel went back in a crushing attack back at the Iranian bases and so forth in Syria. Again, Trump's fault, which is outrageous. So our media, again, siding with the enemy, siding with the North Koreans, siding with the Iranians. And yet again, Hamas, a terrorist organization, is attacking Israel. Oh, they're only using spitballs and paper clips, you know. No, they weren't just using spitballs and paper clips. Molotov cocktails. Go on the internet. They're there. Go to real alternative news sources. You'll see what they're trying to do. There's a grassland, effectively, a barrier, a bumper, if you will, on the Gaza Strip where the fence is and where people tend to live in Israel. There are some communities right near the fence, but most of it is back. And what the Hamas has been doing is trying to burn it. You see the fires in California that get out of control? That's what they're trying to do. That's no joke. In addition, there were intercepted communications by Mossad and interpreted and put on the internet, and I talked about it last night, where the leadership of Hamas is telling these people what to do, telling them how to act, telling them, kidnap Israelis, try and kill Israelis, try and take out the snipers and so forth and so on, and drag them back if you can, because the Israelis don't like it when we take hostages and so forth and so on. Telling them, hide your guns under your clothing, hide your knives under your clothing. None of this was reported by the so-called mainstream media, which isn't mainstream media. Our media stands with our enemies. The Democrat Party stands with our enemies. It just does, they just do. Now the reports today, and it's on my social sites if you want to take a look. A Hamas leader has said 50 of the 62 people killed thus far were members of the terrorist group Hamas. He said it. They're proud of it. 50 out of 62. Another Hamas leader, so-called, what did he say? He was questioning. He said, this is not a peaceful protest. This is an armed revolt, he said. It's an armed revolt. I understand what Hamas is. You understand what Hamas is. It is an army of terrorists, just like Al-Qaeda, also given birth by the Muslim Brotherhood, or Islamic Jihad, also given birth by the Muslim Brotherhood. That's who they are. That's what they are. They're not pretending. And in this directive that they issued to the people that they shoved to the border, they said the goal is to kill the Jews. The goal is to wipe out the state of Israel. 50,000 people pushed up to that border. And as I explained last night on radio, I want you to think about this. This is a nation of 13 million people, 6 million Jews. That would be the equivalent of 1.3 million people on our border. Let's pick our southern border. 1.3 million, a significant percentage of that population, terrorists, trying to rush our border. We had a caravan of 1,000 people trying to get to this country from Central America. They weren't armed, they weren't terrorists or whatever. Report day in, day out, how we have to stop them. Imagine 1.3 million rushing our border, rushing it, trying to get in. What would we do? What would we do? Many of them terrorists, many of them drug kingpins and so forth and so on. Well, the Israelis have to do it, the 50,000. They've dropped leaflets over there telling the people, don't do this. They've dropped leaflets over there saying, you could get killed. They tried rubber bullets at first. It didn't work. Then they had to use real bullets. But they had snipers, Mark, snipers. Yes, they had snipers. They didn't use tanks. They didn't have machine gun nests. They didn't use F-16s. They didn't use bombers like the Syrians would do, like the Iranians would do, like almost every one of those countries would do to their own people or other people in their country. They're using snipers for a reason. They're trying to figure out who's whom. And they can see who the most aggressive ones are, and they can try and make a decision on what to do to try and limit the casualties. But that's not the way the American media reported. They're using snipers against an 8-month-old baby. What the hell is an 8-month-old baby doing on the front lines of a violent Hamas-ordered riot when they're armed and they say it's not peaceful, and 50 out of 62 of the ones who were killed were Hamas terrorist members? Now, I'm not done. I was over there in Israel, in Jerusalem specifically, because I wanted to see with my own 2 eyes the opening of the American embassy in Jerusalem. It was an enormously wonderful and historic occasion. There were members of Congress there, 4 senators and I think like 14 or so members of the House, give or take. All Republicans. Not a single elected Democrat, not one, came to the ceremony. Not a single elected Democrat came to the ceremony. What does that tell you about the Democrat Party and the left? What does that tell you about them? Chuck Schumer is Jewish. He's the head of the Democrat Party in the Senate. He wasn't there. He wasn't there. What does that tell you about him? What does that tell you about them? I don't need to finish that sentence. You know what it tells you. 1995, you may not know this. Congress voted and they passed a law. And the law said the United States federal government, the executive branch, shall move the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Why? Jerusalem is the capital of Israel, and each country gets to decide what its capital is. Every single nation we have relations with, our embassy is in their capital as they designate their capital. We don't get to designate their capital. The UN doesn't get to designate their capital. Their enemies don't get to designate their capital. The European Union doesn't get to designate their capital. Israel is a sovereign state. It's a democracy. It gets to decide its capital. And it just so happens that capital has been the capital of the Jewish people for 3,500 years. Every damn country opposed to what that government's doing didn't even exist when the Jews were in Jerusalem, with all due respect. And there's only one government that protects all the holy sites in Jerusalem, particularly East Jerusalem, protects the Jewish sites, the Christian sites, and the Muslim sites. And that's the Israeli government. When the Jordanians took over that city, took it over in 1948, the war for Israel, Jewish independence, and kept it until 1967 when the Israelis took it back. For 19 years, they were destroying the synagogues, they were destroying the Christian places as well. The holiest of sites. That's not what takes place now. That's not what takes place now. 1995. Do you know what the vote in the Senate was to pass that law, to move our embassy? 93-5. 93-5 in the Senate. In June of 2017, a little less than a year ago, they voted again in Congress. To underscore the point, you know what the vote in the Senate was a little less than a year ago? 90-0. Democrats and Republicans. Not a single Democrat went to that celebration. Not one. Why is that? Why is that? So that was the law. And you listen to our media today, they say, Trump moved the embassy to Jerusalem. He's instigated all this violence. Ladies and gentlemen, you have Muslims killing Muslims in the Middle East by the hundreds of thousands. 500,000 people slaughtered in Syria. Jews didn't do that. Israel didn't do that. America didn't do that. Trump didn't do that. The Muslims did it to themselves. The Arabs did it to themselves. What's taking place in Iran right now? The Persians. What's taking place in Yemen right now? Absolute horrific genocide taking place there, instigated by the Iranians. And you go over and over, place after place after place. The Israelis have nothing to do with it. All they want to do is be left alone and live their lives in peace. And there are many Arabs who agree with this. When I was in Israel over the weekend, I had a cab driver. I talked about this last night. He was Egyptian, he was Muslim, and he'd been an Israeli citizen for 35 years. He left. He fled Egypt to go to Israel. And there's many cases like this of Arabs doing exactly that because they're treated with respect, and they must be under the law in Israel. And he says to me, without provocation, he starts talking. He said, where are you going? I said, you know, the embassy, the new embassy, the American embassy. He said, I want to tell you something. He said, I'm Egyptian, I'm a Muslim, I've lived in this country for 35 years. And here's what he said. If the Palestinians would be peaceful with the Israelis, the Jews, they could get anything they want. They could get anything they want. But they won't be, because of their leadership. And to see our media, and what I meant when I said last night, it's all over the internet now. You know, you want to hear the real echo chamber? Every talk show host today is repeating what I said last night, and that's good. But somebody has to blaze the trail, because they don't have the guts to do it until I do it. And I said, our media have blood on their hands. The Democrats have blood on their hands. Hamas is playing to NBC. Hamas is playing to MSNBC. Hamas is playing to CNN, ABC, CBS, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all of them. Hamas is playing to the Democrat Party because they know the more little babies that are killed, the greater the PR victory that they have. They don't care about human life, including that of their own people. They are a terrorist organization. That's what that means. So when our media keeps pushing their propaganda out, keeps blaming the victim rather than the perpetrator, well, what do you think that does? That incites them, motivates them, encourages them even more, because that's what it's all about. They have blood on their hands, our media and the Democrat Party. So I just wanted to point this out. The new information today is information we actually know, but the Hamas leadership is bragging about the fact that 50 out of 62 were Hamas soldiers who were killed. Yeah, they're soldiers, not babies. And this isn't a peaceful march. This is a peaceful march. What do you think, we're in America? This is a violent armed uprising. We're Hamas.
For more, sign up for Levin TV.